A major victory tonight for Iraqi forces in the battle against ISIS terrorists. Iraqi soldiers are said to have recaptured the heart of the town of Beirut, home to the country's largest refinery. They were aided by U.S.-led coalition airstrikes. There is no word yet on the fate of that refinery itself, which has been under ISIS control since June. Joining us on this Veterans Day is a special guest with a unique insight on what service members may be feeling right now. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz formerly commanded Special Forces during multiple tours in Afghanistan. He also has worked all angles of foreign policy here in Washington for 2 different administrations. He's still serving in the reserves. He has a new book out called Warrior Diplomat, a Green Beret's Battles from Washington to Afghanistan. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Thanks, Brett.
You know, listen, we are just seeing this new deployment of at least 1,500 troops to Iraq.
Right.
And they are still being called non-combat troops. We're now at about 3,100 non-combat advisors. Explain that for people, because those families who are saying goodbye to those soldiers probably don't think they're non-combat.
Sure, absolutely. Well, a few things that's important to point out. One, there's a major difference between training and advising. These guys that are being sent now are being sent mainly as trainers, and they need to be allowed to do the combat advising. So, you know, an analogy may be that you have coaches that are coaching a football team, in this case, Green Berets coaching the Iraqi Army, the Kurds, what have you. But then when they go out to the game, the coaches stay back at practice. So we need to be able to have those guys go forward, work with the units, call in airstrikes, call in medevac, do the true mentor and advising. And will that put them in harm's way? Yes, it will, but let's not tie their hands behind their back. And from a frustration standpoint... There
is a frustration there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The guys out in the field are frustrated because they're really kind of sitting on their hands and are not being allowed to roll out the gate with the Iraqi Army and with the Kurds and eventually the Free Syrian Army. And then from their family standpoint, you know, it's one thing to have your loved one and your soldier be gone, but knowing that they're over there frustrated and not being able to do what they were fully trained to do is disheartening. And
you hear it. I mean, you hear it from guys over there.
Absolutely. I'm in touch with the guys over there, and I'm certainly still in touch with the folks in Afghanistan, where, you know, on the one hand, you have guys being sent, and gals as well, being sent to do training, kind of advising, but not really. And then in Afghanistan, it's, you know, frankly, they feel forgotten.
This is a long war. We haven't talked much about how long it's going to be, but you put it into perspective.
I do. I try to end the book with talking about a country that was in Asia. That is in Asia. It was devastated by war, by occupation, had a higher literacy rate. But then, you know, the country is South Korea, and I think it's a great example of showing what we can do with American engagement over time. So, you know, what we're fighting right now is a new Cold War, and whether it was Germany and Korea then, now it's Afghanistan and Iraq, and yes, these are our longest wars in some sense, but really we're only about a decade into what could be a 50, 60, 70-year-long effort.
Yeah, you write in the book, among other things, the current policy is based on the assumption that al-Qaeda can't stage a comeback after we withdraw, talking about Afghanistan.
Right.
I have yet to find someone who supports the administration's drawdown strategy who can tell me what we're going to do if all these assumptions are wrong and al-Qaeda stages a comeback after we leave. Al-Qaeda's resurgence in Syria and Iraq, along with groups like the Islamic State of Syria and al-Sham, ISIS, shows the folly of this strategy and hope. Is there real concern inside the military about this overall strategy?
Sure. You know, again, this is the long war. This is our new Cold War, and this is going to take decades and decades. And we need leadership to start wrapping, you know, kind of the American people's minds around this effort. So in Afghanistan, for instance, right now, we have a very, very fragile political transition. We have an Afghan National Army that may hold up, or it may not, as we saw with the Iraqi Army. My point is, I'm not willing to take that risk. And right now, the administration's policy is to take us to 0 troops by the end of 2016, and I think it's a fantastic mistake.
You lay out some specific examples about things that you've seen as a commander on the ground. Rules that came down from on high. For example, you had to have a certain amount of troops guarding a post, and if it didn't happen and they didn't meet that set, then they couldn't do patrols.
Right. You know, so what we experienced out on the ground was an accumulation of bureaucracy and rules, and each one in isolation made sense. For instance, after a base was overrun, you had to have 12 soldiers to guard the base. Well, after the movie, you know, we've all seen the movie Lone Survivor. After that 4-man Navy SEAL team was compromised, then you had to have 6 men on any dismounted patrol. Well, I would come across platoons with only 15 men. They didn't have enough to stay back at the base. They didn't have enough to go out. And so they were really, frankly, just kind of stuck. And you know, we really need to cut through that kind of red tape and let our soldiers do what they're trained to do. They're the best in the world.
Quickly, are you optimistic on this Veterans Day about where the military is, or are you concerned?
Look, we have the best trained and equipped military in the world. Let them do their job. Give them clear goals, give them clear guidance, give them the resources, which we often lacked in Afghanistan that I talk about in the book, to do what they need to do, and they'll get it done. We've seen it time and time and time again.
Mike, thank you very much. Again, the book, Warrior Diplomat.